Another thought about this non-anxious presence idea, from my point of view, is that the more we can do that, especially the more we can model understanding or empathy, the more we model for kids something that's really useful in all their relationships. I mean, there's never a relationship, whether a personal relationship or a relationship in work, where the best thing is to land on somebody or to be highly critical. And we may have to give them feedback, and we may have to let them know that this needs to be done a different way. But when it's done with compassion or understanding, it's typically more effective. And I think that moving this direction of being a non-anxious presence allow us to model kind of values that most of us want our kids to have. And I'll also mention that when I used to do therapy, I was so struck by how often I'd be talking with a parent, and sometimes the mom would be crying, sometimes both parents would be crying, and they say, I just want my kid to feel good about himself. And I'd say, well, it's probably, we're going to be able to help him feel better about himself as we feel better about him. Because if we feel really worried or fearful or anxious about him, or we feel really frustrated, it's hard to give the message that it's okay for you to be who you are. It's got to give that message that you can feel good about yourself. And so it's just, I keep coming back to this idea that healing our own fear about our kids is one of the most important things we can do, in part because we can compellingly just model. They just know we like them as they are. We can enjoy them more. And I think that being enjoyed by your parents is arguably the best thing for a kid.
It's a really good point. And I would circle back to your point about how we oftentimes, we need to be empathetic and sensitive when we're talking with colleagues or classmates, and how I often see, in myself and in family members and in my life, where people will oftentimes speak to their kids in ways that they really would never speak to other people. Now part of it is that, if I'm really, too unkind with a colleague, he or she may just turn on his heel and be like, that's that, I'm out of here, where my kid may not have that option quite as much.
Yeah, right.
But I suspect also it's that there's probably very little in people's work environments or school environments that feel as stressful as what goes on with our kids, because, as your point you made earlier, we tend to think so much about the future of our kids and see this thing going poorly now. My gosh, if this continues on this trend and this tendency to kind of, to catastrophize in ways that are based out of love, but also really based out of fear. And so I think it can be helpful, to your point, to be very gentle when we're giving that feedback, to be empathetic, but I think also to model that for our kids with ourselves, that when we make mistakes, people, and oftentimes that's the other sort of second category, we tend to beat our kids up more than we beat other people up, but people also tend to be very self-critical in ways, I think, that are oftentimes out of proportion, and more so than they would be with other people. I had a student some years ago, well, I'll see a lot of times kids, and they'll make mistakes, and they, that's such a stupid mistake, right? I'm such an idiot. And I'll let it go once, and then the second time I usually lean in and say something like, well, I said, if I may, I said, if we played baseball together, Bill was a big baseball player, and I'm terrible. I think I led him being hit at bat, and my only stat. And we were on the team together, and everyone else is out sick, and you got to find somebody there to play third base because everybody else is sick, and you throw me in there, right? And I'm pretty terrible, and it's a routine ground ball, and I go to catch her, and I pick up my glove, and there goes the ball. Well, what I said to the student, what would you say? I said, she looks at me. So you'd probably say, like, it's all right, you'll get the next one. Or if I strike out, that's okay, you'll get the next one. Now, you could take your hat and throw it on the ground, like, you're terrible, right? But we don't do that. One, because it's kind of bad form. But two, because you also know that if you do that to me, it gets me so stressed out that I'm not likely to perform well the next time through. And so I'm constantly, when I see that, I'm constantly encouraging kids to, when they speak to themselves, to be at least as gentle with themselves, and at least as forgiving or accepting or understanding with themselves as they would be with their friends. And so I think if we hold that in mind as parents, when we make mistakes, to be very gentle with ourselves. And not that we say, oh, it doesn't matter, but say, oh, it's all right. Everybody makes mistakes, and how can we do that better going forward? If we practice that with ourselves all day long, I think it becomes very easy to come home with our kids when we otherwise might be stressed, and sort of use that kind of more consultative, a little more empathetic model with them as well.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you.